good coaches understand that we all need good coaching.
Your conscious awareness that we are, sentient human beings and we do have choice.
So that's the advantage of a coach or consultant coming in. They can see those things.
Awareness is this beautiful, peaceful, loving undercurrent.
You should help people tell their stories.
That real human connection has never been any more important.
The work is ongoing.
Hello, everybody. Trevor, how are you this morning? Nice to see you pop into the comments. Anybody else that's coming in as you join us, go ahead and pop in the comments. Say hi. Mike, how are you today? Thanks for being here.
Doing great. Thanks for having me, Nathan.
Awesome. Let's go ahead and we'll start going. First, for anybody who's coming in that doesn't know already, Tilted Bench is a weekly show that I do here on LinkedIn. It's also streaming live on YouTube. We talk on Wednesday at noon with professional coaches about the work they do, why they do it, what's important about it, how it works, why it works, all those good things. So hey, Evan. Evan is a friend of mine from going way back to when I was a kid, Mike. So Evan, is really cool to see you, man. Mike, hi, Bridget. Thanks for joining us. Mike, go ahead and kick us off. Tell us a little bit about what you do and who you are.
My name is Mike Kraus. I am based in Boise, Idaho. And for the last 25 years or so, I've spent my professional career working in the nonprofit sector primarily. I lived overseas for a while and did some work with NGOs or non-governmental organizations over there. And about a year ago, actually, around this time, I made the decision that I wanted to start my own coaching and consulting business and to focus on helping nonprofits and nonprofit leaders specifically with imposter syndrome, or the term that I like to use most often, especially if you've seen it on LinkedIn, is imposterism. Just to kind of take that syndrome word out of there, because I think sometimes that can be a misnomer and can have an impact on how people feel about even identifying or admitting maybe they need some support. When you have syndrome or disability behind a term, I think there can be some complications and holdbacks for that. So last November, I started my business and went full-time actually the end of February of this year. So really about 6 months fully into doing this, and I'm loving it. I love connecting with people and meeting new nonprofit leaders and new organizations and helping them work through imposter syndrome throughout all levels of the organization, because it's not unique to just the leaders of the organizations themselves.
Everybody, one of the things I was just telling Mike when we were talking the pre-live is that I have been surprised recently to learn kind of how widespread issues around feeling like imposters, issues around confidence are. There are tons of people who are going through this. There are people who you would never think have confidence issues or ever feel like an imposter at all, and yet there they are. Mike, do you have specific targets in terms of your clients? I mean, I know that your heart is really with the nonprofit sector. Tell us a little more about that.
Yeah, funny enough, getting into nonprofits, when I was still 19, I think it was the first time I started working with a nonprofit, and it kind of became something that I've just kind of found myself doing. But through that journey myself, I realized the power, the influence that nonprofit organizations have, small civil society entities have in our communities, and the impact that they have, but sometimes the lack of support that those organizations have, resource-wise, with either the time, the talent, the financial resources for professional development, for mental health, mental fitness services. And so when I kind of embarked on this journey about a year and a half ago, when I hired my own coach and went through this process, it really kind of highlighted the needs within this community of nonprofits is to support them where they need that support most, and to honestly provide it at a way that's not going to be debilitating to their budgets, either on an individual level or an organizational level. If you're scrapping for money from grants or just donations in the community, it's really tough to justify when you're going 100 miles an hour every single day to keep the lights on and to support the community and the clients that you serve, to worry about sometimes what support do I need, and can I actually take that time and that energy to devote it to myself when I've got all these other things coming down the road at me. I've got all this talent around me, volunteers, board members, staff that I've got to support along the way. And so part of me getting into and focusing on nonprofits and their leaders and really everyone in the organization was really saying, let's simplify this a little bit and see how we can help everybody at all levels sort of optimize their performance and their well-being throughout. We were talking about also in sort of the pre-show, I'm also jumping into working with college level athletes. Imposterism, I mean, if I like to sort of clarify imposterism a little bit and just talk about self-doubt. That's a lot of what comes through with imposterism. It was pretty universal from my experience with my clients. And self-doubt hits athletes really hard. That performance block and mental performance hurdle jumps in so often. And especially at a time when young adults, athletes are struggling with identity and managing being in a new environment, their social circles, trying to figure out what they're doing with their life. What does life after university or college look like? On top of, I'm also maybe a scholarship or walk-on athlete trying to, make a name for myself in the sport or for my team and support my college or university. And there's so much pressure. And so I really want to jump into that as well. And so it seems a little interesting that they're two different fields, but imposterism is imposterism regardless. And I work with everyone. I work with project managers for profit companies, and everything in between. So it's not like I just turn people down if they need the support, but I'm trying to focus it too.
Let me throw this up here. Trevor just asked this. This is a good question. Competency imposterism versus feeling like being excluded. Different or overlapping or the same? What do you think about that, Mike? The interplay between feeling excluded and having a sense of imposterism.
So that's a really good question, because I like to think from my personal experience individually, but also what I see with my clients. I find a couple different layers to imposterism, and this kind of ties into Trevor's question, which is you can have this overwhelming, pervasive self-doubt that really impacts how you believe in yourself, your abilities, and your overall mindset. But then there's another layer of it, which is where I actually found myself initially when I sought my own coach. It wasn't that I was doubting my abilities as a nonprofit leader, maybe because I had a lot more experience and I had kind of reframed it and I felt better about it. But I was feeling a sense of identity crisis in essence. I wasn't really sure if that's where I wanted to be anymore. And so imposterism, from my experiences, yes, there's that prevailing and continual self-doubt and the sense of, am I competent? Am I in the right place? Am I looking into everything that I have? All these achievements that people are telling me I'm great at, but I just don't feel it. And I'm feeling like I'm masquerading with a mask on every single day. I'm not really sure who I am anymore. Maybe life has just changed. Maybe I've changed. Maybe I'm just not in the right place. Maybe I don't know what my values and my strengths are. So it's not, I also don't like living in an either or, black and white binary mindset with a lot of things. And I think it doesn't have to be, it's either this or that. It can be both, and it can be at different levels. This is interesting. I did this post a couple months ago, I think it was, on LinkedIn about lava lamps, and I may have used a few expletives in that post. But there was imposterism really kind of reminded me of a lava lamp. And when you think of a lava lamp and maybe some traditional 1970s stuff without all the drugs to coincide, I picture a lava lamp as these balls of jelly or whatever it is floating in there, and as they're bumping into each other, they are merging together and some separating. And so you have different sizes coming out of that. And that's how imposterism is to me sometimes. It takes on a different form every minute of the day. It's constantly changing and evolving, almost like an amoeba is stretching and then coming together and then breaking off in different ways. And so your imposterism today may look very different than it does tomorrow. And it may be an underlying current of that self-doubt and some self-sabotage, some fear, some sense of lack of competency in something, or it could be a bit of an identity crisis that also morphs with something else tomorrow because of some situation that happens. But that doesn't mean it's not manageable.
Right. So this is, the work that you're doing. You're trying to help people overcome this, move past this, learn how to live with it. And you've chosen to put it in this great way, right? Optimizing performance and well-being, which is what we've got for our title here. Tell us a little bit about when you say that, what do you mean by that? And what's important about those words?
Yeah. And I think maybe I'm going to jump in with one thing you said there too, which is, overcoming imposterism, imposter syndrome, imposter phenomenon, whatever term you want to use. I think this comes up, I see it a lot, and it can be with any sort of mental health, mental fitness practice, things that we want to work on for growth purposes. I think overcoming can be sometimes daunting to think about, almost like there's this prescriptive panacea out there that I just take this pill or I just do this exercise and everything is resolved. I never have to worry about it again. And it's not. I use the term harnessing a lot in coaching because it's almost like we're putting a lasso around it and we're trying to contain it or box it into a little bit to where we can understand it and work with it within these certain confines and not let it get out of control. But it actually ties into the optimization pretty well. And here's a story that actually really kind of clarified it for me in the last few days, actually. My wife and I had we're having an issue with our gas fireplace, which, I mean, it's still like 85 degrees here in Idaho. So, we're not needing a gas fireplace right now, but we decided, let's kind of get it tuned up, do some preventive maintenance on it. And so we contacted this local appliance company that we work with, and they came out and then checked it the other day and they found an issue. And it was not a good issue to find. The gas valve was malfunctioning. And so I'm going to nerd out for a second and kind of talk about it because it kind of, I need to understand how it ties into the bigger concept of optimization. But basically you turn on the switch for the gas fireplace and it worked. And then you turn off the switch, but the pilot light was still kind of on, just glowing in the distance. And that's not supposed to happen. And so basically they said, like, your valve is not closing or sealing the way it's supposed to. And they took a wrench and they just smacked the side of it. And then the pilot light just went out. And I was like, oh, well, that was pretty simple. And it was just that there was just a disconnect and the valve wasn't closing completely to not let the pilot light be on and to not let the gas through. And this could have had major repercussions if we didn't deal with it. And I like to think of optimization like that sometimes, where sometimes there's just one thing off. There's just a valve that's not closing completely, and it can impact everything else in our life. And we don't even realize it. I mean, this valve could have been on for the last 3 months or 6 months. I don't even know how long it's been malfunctioning. And it seems like a small issue until it's not. If there's a breeze that comes through and blows out that pilot light, but that valve's not sealed, you still have gas that's leaking in and leaking into your house and can cause obviously major issues. And I think that's not just with imposterism, but I think about coaching in general is coaching is one of those tools that helps you kind of find where there's some valves that are not being sealed. And it's just that little tap or replacement or nudge or jolt to kind of hit reset. And that allows us to then move forward into the bigger areas. So before we can even tackle mindset and understanding what's causing our imposterism, our fears, our self-doubts, what's that limiting belief that we have that we've been carrying with us, sometimes we just need a little bit of a nudge or a jolt or something to kind of do that little tapping, like on that gas valve, close that valve so we can kind of start getting some clarity. And then we can start doing the work to optimize. And really that valves serve both points. Like, the fireplace isn't working optimally when that valve is still not closing. And a coach can be that little tap. in this case, it's better to actually just replace the whole stinking valve. But sometimes coaching doesn't have to be this complete overhaul like that. But that's kind of how I view optimization. It's just sometimes these little tweaks that we need to do so that we can actually be and perform better in our lives, so that what we're doing in our work environment can then cascade and trickle down into our life outside of work, and vice versa. So we're not carrying home stress, anxiety, fear when we go home to see our partner, our dogs, go to our softball games, whatever it is.
So I was smiling as you were talking about that, because I feel like this is a new metaphor that I can put in my toolbox, right? That you're metaphorically tapping somebody with the wrench, right? But this is a theme in coaching that comes up a lot, is that one of the difficulties we all face individually in our lives, both personally and professionally, is that you can't see the label on the outside of the jar you're in, right? Like there are certain questions you don't know to ask yourself. There are certain levels of awareness that you just don't have, but that somebody on the outside may be able to see. Are there specific ways that you like to kind of work with your clients to reflect things back to them to help them see the stuff they can't see?
Yeah, there's a lot of, maybe one of the buzzwords in the last decade has been around emotional intelligence. And that's something that we focus on a lot in my coaching practice. The other one that I really kind of focus on, and I think maybe coaches do this at different degrees, I focus a lot on psychological safety and understanding basic foundational psychological needs that we have. So I'm going to try and break this down as briefly as possible in a nutshell, but I want to take, if you've ever heard of Maslow's hierarchy, it's sort of components of that, but it's breaking it down even further. And within Maslow's hierarchy, you have the base needs, but really in the middle part of the pyramid is the psychological needs, that safety piece. And it broke it down under self-determination theory. There was sort of another offshoot from Maslow with this, really focusing on those foundational psychological needs. And those needs came out in self-determination theory, which really talked about autonomy, belonging, and competence, or what I call the ABCs. And to a lesser extent, the self-actualization that Maslow talked about at the very end is on the ABC scale is letter D, which is drive, direction, or what we would call purpose. So what I do with my clients is we talk about those foundational needs, the ABCs and the D, a lot, and understanding where are we at with autonomy, or that sense of individual freedom or ability to exert free will in our life. Is that missing? Belonging. Do we feel like we're part of a community or tribe? Do we have a sense of that we're being heard or seen by those around us, whether in our work environments or at home? And then competence. Do we actually have a sense that we are capable of performing that whatever task is in front of us? Not only are we skilled or knowledgeable, but is there a sense of ownership over something? And when we break it down that level, a lot of what I find with imposterism is one or more of those needs is just out of whack. It's just out of alignment. It's almost like that valve, that gas valve. It just needs to be tapped a little bit. It doesn't have to be a complete overhaul. And so in a work environment with nonprofits, what I find is with nonprofit leaders, let's say, maybe there's some disconnect with their board. Maybe they're on a different page. Maybe their strategy plan is outlined, but maybe they're still kind of going in different divergent paths on how they're going to achieve their goals for the year, for the next 3 years. That can create a dissonance within that relationship. And so maybe a sense of autonomy or freedom to make decisions, to problem solve from the executive level isn't there because they're not on the same page with their board members or their committee members or whatever it is. And so trying to understand, okay, so is maybe your autonomy out of line, that basic psychological need out of line or out of whack right now? And what sort of tap do we need to do to get that in line? And it doesn't mean that once we do that, it's always going to be in alignment. So we always have to be reevaluating that. And so then we can go down the line of the ABCs and even the D. And over time, we create habits and routines where it becomes second nature that we can ask ourselves, okay, where am I at on this ABC or D scale? And that really helps us. It helps with empathy for sure, but it also helps us internalize a sense of, are we in like harmony or equilibrium with ourselves and where we're going?
I like those words, harmony and equilibrium, because as you're talking about what you mean by optimizing, like I get this sense that you're trying to shape things just so that they're better, so that you've looked at details, you've thought about all the little things. but not necessarily perfectionism, right? Perfectionism is very often a close friend of imposterism and of lacking confidence, especially when we start comparing to other folks. Um, One of the things we were talking about earlier, and I want to make sure we get a chance for you to share all this with everybody, is your experience with the Peace Corps. Do you want to take us down that path a little bit?
Sure, I love talking about the Peace Corps, and I love talking about it because it really ties into coaching in so many ways, and so we'll get to that. So I did back in 2009. I flew to Botswana, and I was there for 4 years working with civil society, so working with NGOs and CBOs, which is non-governmental organizations or community-based organizations. Working with government offices, with hospitals and clinics and things like that around the HIV and AIDS epidemic in Southern Africa. And I loved it. It was just an amazing experience. And I think one of the things when I think about optimizing and really how that Peace Corps experience has really transcended my time over there, and since I've been back now 10 years, is this thought that sometimes that readjustment or that realignment is just a simple mechanism. And it can be, I mean, we couldn't drive in the Peace Corps. There's some restrictions on things like that. So, you're walking, you're taking taxis, public transportation. But walking out of your house, even if you have to walk a mile to get to your place of work, on dusty, dirty roads, it's an opportunity to disconnect from so much of the anxiety inducing parts of life. That moment where you can kind of savor the environment and the present moment you're in. And so that's really carried over into my coaching practice a lot, is taking that time. It's not always this big leap that we have to do in coaching for our clients. It really can be that 1% adjustment to do the optimization. And sometimes that 1%, that nudge that we need is to get out of our own head most of the time. And we can do that by just obviously going for a walk, taking a deep breath, using our senses to notice where we are in the moment. And so Peace Corps really got me into that mindset and that ability to start focusing on what was around me in the present moment and stop worrying about the past that I can't control and stop worrying about the future that I also have no control over in the moment.
In the show intro, there's this line from Lindsay Parker where she talks about awareness being this warm, loving undercurrent in coaching, that a big part of the work is to help us all practice awareness of our lives, where we are, what we're doing. And I like that connection about disconnection, that sometimes we can get too plugged into a lot of things that are distracting, that call us to compare ourselves to things that aren't helpful. Isn't there a sense in which, like, the whole point of coaching is to kind of create this space in which you can unplug from all that?
There was moments, I lived in this when I was in Botswana. I ended up going back a couple years later. I went to Rwanda and did about 5 months in Rwanda for Peace Corps in a short stint. And it was kind of the same moment where when I was in Botswana, I would have to take a bus to the capital city, which is about 6 hours away. And I had to do that at least once a month to go meet with some of our program people in the office or the headquarters. And so that's 6 hours down from where I lived and 6 hours back, usually a couple days later. And this is really, I mean, I went in 2009 and smartphones had just been out maybe a year and a half or so. But I didn't have one. And even if I had one, it probably wouldn't have worked in Botswana anyway. The cell phone plans wouldn't have covered it or supported it. But I was glad I didn't have it, because I would go on those bus rides and I would always bring like a National Geographic to read, and I never read it. And it's not because I didn't like reading or I just wanted to carry around this magazine. It was after I got on there, I found myself just staring out the window for 6 hours. And it was so peaceful to reconnect in that moment. The buses were extremely hot. Botswana would get to 90 plus degrees, if not more, pretty much on a daily basis. And then it would drop down to maybe in the 50s. It was a very interesting climate. But the buses were hot. They were always packed. And most of the time there was no windows that were being opened. In the cultural perspective, people didn't like to open windows on the buses. They felt that they were going to get sick, even when it's 90 degrees out. So I'd usually try to get to the back of the bus when I would get on and open the window and sit next to it. And I would usually be the only one on the entire bus that had the window cracked a little bit. So it was hot, it was muggy, dirty, dusty, but beautiful at the same time. And just living in that moment and just experience for 6 straight hours of not having something to distract my mind and just being present in the moment is a really powerful thing. And it's something I really miss. And it's hard to kind of recapture. And I think in our fast-paced society these days. But one thing that really stood out and how it ties in the coaching for me now, and what I really tried to bring forward, is all of that is just a scaffold. I mean, it really is. All these tools, things that we do in our lives that are actually healthy that we don't even realize, are just scaffolds. And scaffolding is, you know what it is. It's the support mechanism that people put up as they're working on buildings and structures. And then as you move down, you take off a layer of the scaffolding as you realize, I don't need that high level support. And by the end, the scaffolding gets completely dismantled because you don't need it anymore. And taking a bus ride like that was that scaffolding I needed to kind of get me reacquainted with my senses, being present in the moment, and to where I didn't need it anymore. I didn't actively have to pursue that. And when our coaching, and what I learned from Peace Corps and carry forward now, is how can I scaffold my clients? What support mechanisms did they need in the moment? And then how can we start peeling back the layers of that support as we go forward? Because if I'm, a year from now, 2 years from now, I'm still working with the same client on the same issues and the scaffolding's at the same layer, I'm not doing my job. It was a really important piece of Peace Corps, by the way, is the idea is that Peace Corps is there for too long, then they're not doing their job. The idea is that Peace Corps is there to support the culture and the population that they're invited to, and help do some capacity building of skills, technology, knowledge, experience, and learn about the culture, and then get out. If you're still there 10, 15, 20 years later, you're not doing your job. And so our job was to work ourselves out of a job. And that's how I see my job as a coach, is I go in and I'm there as that scaffold for my clients. And then I should be done. I should be backing away, and you should be able to carry forward. And there might be some implements of that scaffolding in place that you still want or need, but that's on your terms. I don't need to be that constant hovering presence, in your mind or on a Zoom call every single week.
I love it. I mean, this is another theme that's come up in the show before, and this is something that I remember talking to Brian Berman about, that there are seasons of life, and in some seasons you need a consultant, and in some seasons you need a coach. And for those of you watching who don't know the difference between those, consultants typically are telling you what to do. Coaches are more there as a guide, a companion to help you figure out some stuff for yourself. And there are seasons when you need that. The idea is not to get a coach and just constantly be trying to figure it out. Like, at some point you should grow and you should kind of be able to move on from that. We are at about 2 minutes, everybody. So let's do a couple things. Mike, tell us, what's the best way for anybody to get in touch with you if they want to reach out?
Definitely on LinkedIn is one of those ways. I love, I post almost every single day on some very quirky topics around leadership or culture or imposterism. So reach out to me or DM me through LinkedIn. You can email me at mike@globalbound.org. On my website is globalbound.org. And there's a Let's Connect section there, and you can reach out to me there if you have questions about what I do. Or if you just want to connect. I love having these conversations.
That's awesome. All right. Mike, I'm going to let you have everybody. I'm going to turn off the chat overlay for a minute. I'm going to turn me off. Mike, I'm going to let you have the whole screen and give us a takeaway, some final thought that you want us to hang on to and remember from this.
Perfect. Thanks, Nathan. The takeaway that I have when I think about what coaching is and can be, and really what it meant to me as I went through coaching myself, was that it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to ask for support. I had a client when I first started and went full time, really after the beginning of the calendar year. And we were about 3 months into working together. And I just kind of checked in and I said, what's been the most helpful as we've gone through this program? And she said, honestly, it was the day that I made the decision and she used the word surrender, and to ask for support or help, was the day that I saw some of the biggest growth. And it wasn't meant to be this idea that the work that we were doing together was not powerful and informative and empowering, but there was some work she had to do on her own end, which was basically recognizing that she wanted some support, as Nathan, you're talking about with those seasons. And she was in a season of needing support from a coach. And maybe she's moving into a season where she wants to be that mentor coach for someone else. But that initial step was asking for support, surrendering that she could do it all herself. And there was no shame in that. And she recognized the power of that moment. And so it's one of those things I talk about with potential clients all the time, whether it's nonprofit leaders themselves or some of their staff, is talking about that we don't have to carry the load all on our own. It's almost like we go on a vacation to Europe and we're doing all the sightseeing, but we never drop off the luggage at the hotel room. We decide we're just going to carry our backpack and some other bags with us for the next 6 hours as we tour these historical sites or museums. And we don't have to do that. We can actually put the bags down. We don't have to carry all that weight with us. So I guess that takeaway is it's okay to ask for help.
I love it. Thank you, Mike. And I saw that, in your post this morning, that was kind of the theme there too, that like, we need help and it's okay to ask for it. Everybody listen to that. And I will too, as is often the case. We do these little, 1 minute things at the end. And I'm like, this is for everybody. And then I'm like, wow, this is for me too. Mike, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate this conversation. I appreciate you. Everybody in the comments, thank you for being here. I hope we will see you again next Wednesday, which will be episode 20.
Awesome.
All
Thanks,
right.
Nathan.
You're welcome. Have a good day, everybody.